welcome to Commander Central episode 166. And today we're going to take a look at Stephen Palmer's Hazezon Tamar tokens deck. I'm Dana.
I'm Max.
And I'm still Matt.
Matt is still with us. Your Monday show went well enough that you've been invited back. Congratulations.
I did it. I graduated to episode 2. That's how you know this podcast has broken in.
There we go, yes.
I've been on here twice now.
Well done, Matt.
Is that all it took? Not 165 episodes?
Right.
Nope.
Well, Chris's foot is still broken, so Matt is joining us for the second show this week, so we appreciate that. Thank you very much, Matt. We're going to be doing a deck tech here, but first I want to ask you guys, how's life going? Has everyone gotten back in the swing of things this first week back from our Thanksgiving vacation as we ease into Christmas?
I mean, I went back to work, if that counts.
Well, one thing I have in my neighborhood, so I live in the older part of town, so the streets here are a little bit narrower than they are everywhere else. And especially this time of year, once we get snow up, it makes things even more narrow. And then on top of it, I'm only about 6 blocks away from the college campus here in town. So during the day, a lot of college students wind up parking on the streets in this neighborhood and then walking to school, the people that don't live on campus. So as a result, large trucks can't get down any of the streets near my house. And this time of year, leading up to Christmas, there's a gazillion Amazon packages being delivered to houses around here. So what happens is there are multiple people on bicycles pulling carts attached to the back of their bike, delivering Amazon packages in my neighborhood all day long.
Gotta stay busy, man. You gotta have that second hustle.
Yeah, so we have a bicycle Amazon delivery this time of year.
I'm surprised Amazon hasn't, hired Uber and Lyft to help deliver stuff, too.
I mean, maybe they do in some neighborhoods. I think this neighborhood is dense enough that it's probably cheaper to just hire some college student on a bicycle to do it. But yeah, it wouldn't shock me that happened in some places for sure.
Well, it's not cost effective up there in Wisconsin where you guys are at to just get a drone up there and do it all that way.
Right, not yet.
No,
not yet.
All the hunters would think it's a pheasant and just shoot it.
God, man, I lived up there for a while. It's true.
Yeah, actually, because you went to college in Minneapolis, right?
I did, yes, in the Twin Cities. So yeah, I don't miss those frozen winters. I played football in college, so we would have the negative 15 degree wind chill, and we'd be outside practicing, and nobody would wear cleats because the ground was frozen solid. I don't miss that, so I'm a few degrees south from you guys. So you enjoy that. I'm glad you guys have found a home, but that is not for me.
Yeah, every year that passes, I understand more and more why the retirees move to Florida and Arizona once they retire and they no longer want to deal with this cold weather, because when you're a little kid and you're going sledding and doing those kind of things in the winter, it's a lot of fun. And also you're a little kid, you don't get cold in the same way you do as an adult, or you just don't notice or don't care. I don't know what it is, but winters is a lot of fun when you're at that age. It is not a lot of fun anymore. I enjoy nothing about this. So yeah.
Well, because we're too old to play outside in the snow now.
I'm going to go sledding. I mean, maybe I should. Maybe the problem is me. Maybe I need to find ways to enjoy it more and actually go sledding.
No. That just is going to spell disaster. I can't be down 2 co-hosts for the entire winter.
That absolutely seems like a recipe for me to also have 6 pins in my foot. You're correct. Okay. If you would like to reach out to us and complain about the weather or ask how Chris's foot's doing, how'd you do that, Max?
Head over to Twitter and hit us up there at CMDR Central. You can also send us a Facebook message by searching CMDR Central, or just pretty much Google CMDR Central and you'll find a way to contact us.
And I actually, Max, this week fired up the CMDR Central Instagram account.
Oh, is that why I got an email on that?
Yeah, it is. And I followed a few people, and then I had intentions this week of taking some pictures of games at the shop and stuff and posting to Instagram. And of course, then promptly forgot about that after I got the account set and going. So hopefully next week I'm going to start trying to post some pictures of games we play when we're actually playing them.
Okay.
You can also find us on flipsidegaming.com.
Yeah, head over to flipsidegaming.com and use promo code CMDR in all caps to get 10% off all orders, $10 or more.
And I think we have a couple of contests here in progress as well, don't we?
Yeah, on Twitter, we are giving away 3 packs of War of the Spark. So find that tweet, like it, retweet it, and follow us to get entered. And then for Patreon, we're giving away the rest of the bundle I just had stashed in my closet. So the other 7 packs are going to one lucky patron supporter.
Nice. Okay. And speaking of Patreon, if you'd like to support us, something that we would really appreciate, how would you do that, Max?
Head over to patreon.com, search CMDR Central, and check out our reward tiers, and one of them includes this Decks You Play episode that you could get.
Yeah, if you'd like to hear us talk about a deck you play and go over it, maybe offer a few suggestions, that is how you would do it for sure. And you might even get so lucky as to have someone of Matt Morgan's stature talk about your deck.
I do bring just enormous insight. It's not good insight, but it's just there's a lot there.
And you know, this is not really relevant necessarily just yet, but to maybe perhaps give a teaser for what we might wind up doing for a contest giveaway next month. When I was at the shop on Tuesday this week and Max wasn't there, our shop owners said, "Oh, by the way, I accidentally ordered a case of Commander decks and didn't mean to. So why don't you talk to me after Christmas if you guys want to give away some decks? We could probably come up with something because we have a bunch." So yeah, we might wind up giving away one of the Commander 2019 decks after Christmas for next month's giveaway. We shall see.
Very nice.
So yes, their fail might be your win. So we might as well jump right into this and take a look at this deck. We got a few notes back like we usually do. So you want to go over those here quick, Max?
Yeah, so Steven said his meta is pretty broad. They have, dinosaur tribal decks, Crewfix group hugs, Nikia, Marin, Teysa, Pirantoothy. For the most part, they avoid cheesy combos, but I win cards are totally okay.
Okay.
The goal of this deck is pretty straightforward. Ramp, 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 and make a bunch of tokens and beat face. And then the deck also takes some of the weaknesses are the fact that it takes a while to get going because of the nature of Hazezon himself. It can be very slow. He's looking to have some more efficient token producers. Also, the deck doesn't do well on card advantage. Most of the draw spells rely on having a board state, so he tends to run out of gas right after board wipes quite often. And then budget-wise, there's no single card should cost more than Hazezon himself.
Which is probably pretty easy to avoid, given that Hazezon's a $100 card.
Yeah, that you almost could get a plateau in here for that price. So, yeah, I think we're pretty safe when it comes to budget.
Very nice.
So, since we might as well get started by talking about Hazezon Tamar. First of all, Matt, do you want to just read the card to us so we know what we're looking at here?
Sure can. So, Hazezon Tamar, 4 in Naya colors, that is a red, a green, and a white. For a 2/4 human warrior that reads, when Hazezon Tamar enters the battlefield, create X/1/1 sand warrior creature tokens that are red, green, and white at the beginning of your next upkeep, where X is the number of lands that you control at that time. When Hazezon leaves the battlefield, exile all sand warriors. So a little bit of a enters the battlefield, a little bit of leaves the battlefield, but you're still making a lot of tokens depending on how much lands you have in play.
So a couple of relevant things here that we might as well get into about Hazezon. It exiles all Sand Warriors, just full stop. So if anybody else happens to control Sand Warriors for whatever reason, Hazezon leaving will get rid of those.
Yeah, you got to watch out for that Sand Warrior tribal that somebody else might be playing.
It's actually Sand and Warriors. 2 separate creature types both get exiled.
Really?
That is true.
Yeah.
It is creature types, yeah.
That's interesting.
All permanents with both sand and warrior creature types are exiled, not just sand warriors.
Okay, well that makes sense, I guess.
Not desert warriors, though.
Right.
Can't get those deserts, just sand.
And because Hazezon, it's a delayed trigger, if you find a way to blink him or do something with him when he comes into play, because the warriors don't show up until your next turn, his exit the battlefield trigger isn't going to do anything because the warriors aren't there. So a lot of times, and I think we discussed this off air, Max, but we played against Jumbo Commanders Hazezon deck in Vegas, I think it was 2 years ago. And I think that was the trick he did. He played Hazezon, which then makes the trigger to make Sand Warriors next turn. And then he was able to blink Hazezon that turn. And because the warriors aren't in play, they don't go away. So he had double triggers that would then come into play the following turn because he was able to blink him and have him come back into play.
Solid.
So that's something to pay attention to. However, the downside of that delayed trigger is because the warriors don't come into play until your next turn, then unless you have a way to grant them haste, they can't attack until the turn after that. So not only is this a 7-mana commander, it's a 7-mana commander that makes tokens that still can't get cast or can't attack until 2 turns later. So assuming you're on curve, you're not swinging with those tokens until turn 9. It's a cool commander, but there's a lot of work you have to do to offset it. So let's get into some of that here a little bit. And the first thing we'll quick look at, the average CMC of this deck is 3.62. That's kind of high, but it's a 7-mana commander. You have Blasphemous Act kind of screwing that up here a little bit. That's never a 9-mana spell, but it looks like one in terms of the curve. And there is a lot of kind of big haymakers in here that jack that up as well, like Avenger of Zendikar and Craterhoof and Elish Norn. Hour of Reckoning does that as well. So, I mean, yes, there's a few slightly misleading spells, but there's a lot of things that cost a lot of mana in here.
Yeah.
Luckily, there's a good amount of ramp too, so we'll get into that. But first things first, let's look at this land base. 37 lands. What do you guys think of what we have here? Any thoughts first to you, Max?
This is the exact land base I would build if I was building a Naya deck. It has the shocks, it has the fetches, it has the check lands, it has the Battle for Zendikar lands, and a couple utility lands. This is a great mana base, in my opinion.
Yeah,
I have no problems with it.
Yeah, for sure. Like, it has fetch lands. It has most of the lands that you can fetch outside of the ABUR duels. It has things like Strip Mine to deal with problems. It has things like the new land Sanctum of Eternity that bounces your commander back to your hand to hopefully maybe do that Hazezon trigger where you can bounce him back and be able to cast him next turn or something, not have the Sand Warriors go away because they're not into play yet. So you have things like that. There's a command beacon to circumvent his expensive casting cost once he gets up to 9 or 11 or 13 or whatever it is. Really, the only thing it's missing in terms of fetchable strong duels is the ABUR duels, and you're in Naya, so actually you're probably in the best 3-color combo to have to get duels, but you're still looking at $500 in dual lands, and that's really tough.
Yeah, a little steep, but I do like that there's even the Canopy lands, the Sunbaked Canyon, the new one from Modern Horizons. You got Horizon Canopy. I mean, outside of the duels missing, I think this is as close to optimal as you can get. It's a very fine mana base. It is a little light on basics. I'm always a big fan of running more basics, just in general. Currently, there's only 11, so maybe up that a little bit. You don't really need too many basic mountains, but it's the forests and the plains that I would maybe up the count on a little bit. But other than that, I have no real criticism. It's fine. I do think in a tokens deck, the new castle, the white castle that produces 2/2 knights, you could find a way to sneak that in as well. But other than that, I have no real criticism on the mana base. It's pretty good.
How about you, Max? Any thoughts here?
Yeah, no, like I said, I think it's great. That castle land that Matt just mentioned is a great include. I didn't even think about that one, but like I said, this is exactly probably how I would build this mana base for myself.
Yeah, I'm kind of on board with all of that too. I think if he wanted to, you could maybe run like City of Brass just because it's going to give you all 3 colors mana, and it's still not terribly costed, at least compared to Mana Confluence. I think we mentioned this in most 3+ color decks, but Exotic Orchard does a lot of work too. I would maybe consider that, but I don't think there's any really obvious cards I would pull out for any of those. This is a really good looking mana base. There might be some tweak you could make to run those that would be slightly better, but there's nothing obvious. However, you guys mentioned the castle. I was thinking about a castle too, but I wasn't thinking about the white castle. I was kind of thinking about Castle Embereth, the red one. And that's the one that has a 3 mana tap ability to give creatures you control +1/+0 till end of turn. If you are in an Alpha Strike position and, there's not a lot of mana rocks in this deck, it's Soul Ring basically. So when you cast Hazezon, he's for the most part, unless you're doing some other shenanigans, and I guess there are a few here, he's probably going to be making you 5 tokens minimum, if not 7 or 9 or 10, or depending on how many lands you have in play. That's a good amount of tokens he's going to make, and the ability to give those +1/+0 when he's swinging for an Alpha Strike is the difference sometimes between 10 damage and 20 damage.
Yeah, I agree with that. I've been really impressed with Castle Embereth as well. I have it in my Valduk deck, and even it looks small. It's only +1/+0, but it's the fact that it's giving you each creature. It's kind of like the Forgotten ability on Perforos, where you can actually pump up your own creatures as well. I do like that. Castle Embereth is probably one of the only castles I would say is generically good in any red deck. I wasn't very, very keen on the castles, but the white one, since it is a token deck, probably fits in. But yeah, I do agree. Castle Embereth would be a good add as well.
All right. Let's jump over to the Planeswalkers, because I know you guys both had some thoughts here, and there are 2 Planeswalkers in the deck. There's Huatli Radiant Champion, and there's Xenagos Reveler. They are both 4 mana Planeswalkers. Huatli is 2 and green-white, and Xenagos is 2 red-green. 3 loyalty for both of them as well. And Xenagos is probably here for his +1 ability, add X mana in any combination of green or red to your mana pool, where X is the number of creatures you control. So that's primarily where that gets used, I'm guessing, to take advantage of your creatures and basically get a big burst of mana to do some other things. His 0, though, makes a 2/2 Satyr token, and it does have haste, which is useful. This is a token deck, so there's things that double tokens. That's not bad at all either. Huatli's +1 gets a loyalty counter on Huatli for each creature you control. So again, in a token deck, it's pretty easy to drop Huatli and immediately, roll her up to a 10 or a 12 loyalty or something. And then the next turn, ideally, you have your tokens behind as blockers to protect her, and you can -8 and get that emblem that says, whenever a creature you control enters the battlefield under your control, you may draw a card. She also has a -1 that gives a creature +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of creatures you control, so it's also kind of an Alpha Strike thing there. They both make sense on paper, but what do you two think of these 2 Planeswalkers?
So my first reaction to seeing Huatli is you should never judge a Planeswalker based off the ultimate ability.
Sure.
I've learned that lesson the hard way, and I've tried to do that. It doesn't always work. Yes, Huatli, you can get, the first turn, you tick her up, get a lot of loyalty. Next turn, you tick her down, get that emblem. That's great, and it's going to happen a lot, but also that's going to have a massive target. Threat assessment generally means you should be focusing on Planeswalkers, because it's going to be very, very hard for Huatli to get that ultimate right away. It's also very board dependent. In Steven's email, he mentions that he struggles to recover from board wipes. Well, Huatli's not going to do that at all. So I'm not really a big fan of seeing Huatli there. Xenagos, I don't mind as much, but for 4 mana to only be making 2/2s, I'm not super keen here either. They do a good job at generating a value, but that also means that the people that you're sitting at the table with, they have to be ignoring them. And I don't think that, especially Huatli with that ultimate, is going to get ignored very long.
How about you, Max? What do you think here?
I 100% agree with Matt. Huatli, judging her ult is what really makes her want to be in every token deck in green and white. But again, it's board dependent, like Matt said. I agree. It's something that isn't going to help you if you have no board. It's going to be a dead card in your hand or something you discard down to hand size because it's not doing you anything. I don't really like Xenagos. His +1 is, again, board dependent, and he's not making a lot of bodies with his 0. So in my opinion, they both could get cut for something that's going to be more efficient at any point of the game, something like Elspeth, Sun's Champion.
Mm-hmm.
Right, who's always going to make you 3 tokens and has the option to board wipe if you need that as well.
Yeah, I think if there's a token commander or token planeswalker that you're going to want, it 100% is Elspeth Sun's Champion as square one. You make tokens, you blow up things that are bigger than your tokens, manages the board. That is kind of the premier token planeswalker. That's where I would start above either of these two.
And the fact that she doesn't kill your commander is really ideal.
Yes. Yeah. That's a very good point. I like Xenagos well enough, but I agree. I think he's probably a little inconsistent, and I would find that frustrating. I agree that Huatli is probably also a little inconsistent. I would say, however, that if you manage to pull it off, she's such an absolute home run that maybe it's worth it. It's going to just seal the game. Like if you are able to drop her when you have, 9 bodies in play and can protect her and then alter her next turn, or alter off a doubling season, although I guess you can't, so ignore that. She's only a 3, but if you're able to get that +1 at the right time and get that emblem, that's backbreaking for the rest of the game. Whereas like the best case scenario for Xenagos is you drop him when you have a ton of creatures in play and you make a ton of mana, and hopefully you have a full grip of cards. So the best case scenario for Xenagos relies on a bunch of extra factors that maybe you can't control, whereas like I think it's easier to hit the best case scenario for Huatli, and I think the best case scenario for Huatli also is much better than the best case scenario for Xenagos.
I do agree with that, and I think you swung me your way. I think if you had to pick between the two, I'd keep Huatli, and I'd replace Xenagos with Elspeth Sun's Champion.
And don't get me wrong, I guarantee there's times when like he top decks Xenagos and looks on and is like, okay, well I'm making 14 mana this turn, let's go. Sure. But there's probably enough times where it just like, well, I guess I'm making a satyr, and that probably feels bad. Whereas I think Huatli probably more consistently is interesting in the game. And again, I think you guys both make a great point about Elspeth. I think Elspeth is going to always do something impactful every single time. So that's what I think I would want here. Let's jump over to artifacts. There's only 3 of them. What do we have here for artifacts, Max?
We have Skull Clamp, Slate of Ancestry, and the aforementioned Soul Ring.
Skull Clamp is Skull Clamp, and I mean, in the worst deck to run Skull Clamp, it's still probably pretty good. Like, if you designed a terrible Skull Clamp deck, it's still probably like, it's still maybe worth a swat. It's just Skull Clamp. Soul Ring is, same situation. It's just almost always great. So let's talk about Slate of Ancestry. And we probably should read that, Max, since it's a fairly obscure card.
So this is a 4-mana artifact from Onslaught. It reads, 4 generic mana, tap, discard your hand, draw a card for each creature you control.
So I see the upside there. Like, there's definitely times that's an absolute powerhouse. But what do you guys think of it?
That's 8 mana to maybe draw a butt ton of cards, or 8 mana to not draw a lot of cards, or it sits on the board not doing anything.
Yeah, it's kind of in Huatli's territory as far as it's very board dependent, and that's already one of the stated weaknesses of the deck. So I would try to cut down and minimize a bunch of those cards that are dependent, and you have to have a board presence for these to succeed, because obviously you're counting on things going too well, and not all the time do they go well. So Slate of Ancestry I like a lot less than Huatli. I think just a basic Harmonize is what you want in this type of deck. It's just going to be so much more consistent. I like to make fun of Dana. It's high floor, low ceiling. Those types of cards that are they're always going to be very good. They may never be extreme home runs, but they're always going to be cards that you want to be seeing in a game because they're just going to smooth out everything. It's going to just consistently help you have a higher impact on the game than Slate of Ancestry. Sure, you might draw 15 cards and you feel really good, but you also might draw one card for 8 mana and you're like, well, this is the dumbest card ever. So consistency to me, I think is something that you want to have here, especially in the card draw slot. Slate of Ancestry is fine. It's very magical Christmas land, though, so I am not a big fan.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's nothing wrong with Magic Christmas Land cards, and they're a lot of fun when they fire off, and I don't want to tell people not to run them because, for all that I preach consistency and having a high floor on your cards, there's absolutely home run cards I run that are like Magical Christmas Land ones. Like I do that myself because when they fire off, that's a lot of fun, and we're playing a game where we're trying to have fun. However, when they don't fire off, that isn't a lot of fun, and when you have a bunch of those in your deck, that really increases the chances of them not firing off, and it increases the chances of you really not having fun. I like Huatli. I mentioned I would probably leave her in the deck, but I don't know if I want multiple of these cards that have a really good chance of not doing anything. And I think Slate is one that has a really good chance of not doing anything. And I would rather just spend that 4 mana on a Harmonize, like you guys said, draw my 3 cards every single time without caring about the board state, without needing to spend 4 more mana to tap it in the first place. I just want to get the job done and move on with playing the game with 3 more cards in my hand, and I think Harmonize does it, and Slate is probably just too erratic. Is there anything you guys would add here in terms of artifacts?
Me, this is my personal preference. He has a lot of like sorcery speed ramp in the deck. It's kind of a safety blanket card for me, but I would like to see like a Chromatic Lantern in here just to kind of smooth out the mana on the off chance this is a very green heavy deck, and if you don't, have your white or red, that's going to fix a lot of problems for you.
It's a very green heavy deck. You mentioned that, and you're correct. There's, Avenger has 2 green pips, and Crater Hoof has 3, and Deep Forest Hermit has 2, and there's, 2 in Shamanic Revelation, and things like that. But there's also a ton of, there's 2 white in Austere Command, and there's 3 white in Hour of Reckoning, and, double white in Elvish Norn, and double white in Divine Visitation. So yeah, it is kind of a mana-intensive deck. I agree, and you probably could do worse in running Chromatic Lantern that's going to just make that effortless for you. So no, I don't think I think that makes sense. Any more inclusions from you, Matt?
I'm not terribly worried. Like we pointed out with the mana base, it's almost close to ideal. You have a lot of fetches, a lot of shocks, so I don't think getting color access is going to be near as big of a problem. If you wanted to run something like Wayfarer's Bauble or anything like that kind of helps get those lands in play, because remember, Hazezon wants a bunch of lands in play.
Yes,
so
that's true.
I don't like the idea of overloading on artifact ramp.
No, that's a good point.
I'd rather have it be land based. If I were going to add an artifact in token decks that have red, I really like Hammer of Purphoros. And on Archidect, you can sort by custom categories, however you want to set it up. And one of them that is on here is Haste Enablers. There's a couple Haste Enablers that I'm not really a big fan of, but Hammer of Purphoros does that, while also, if you draw extra lands throughout the game, you need to get some extra tokens. Hammer Purphoros makes a pretty good backup blocker. So I really like Hammer Purphoros if you're looking for an extra haste enabler, or maybe a better substitute for one of the haste enablers in the deck. But I don't know if I would fuss with the artifacts too much, outside maybe some extra draw effects. Like I said, if you want some artifact-based ramp, Wayfarer's Bauble is probably a decent one there, but I wouldn't fuss actually too much with the artifacts. Skull Clamp is already fantastic with a lot of 1/1s in this deck. Skull Clamp is going to draw you mountains of cards.
All right, I think that all makes sense to me. And like I said, I do agree. I do understand the Chromatic Lantern point, but that's actually a good point too. That maybe you're better off just ramping lands just to benefit Hazezon. So I don't know which way I would go necessarily, but I see both those points. Let's jump over to enchantments right now, then, because there's 13 of these in the deck. Do you want to read them to us here, Matt?
I sure can. So the enchantments are Anointed Procession, Aura Shards, Burgeoning, Divine Visitation, Exploration, Fervor, Fires of Yavimaya, Goblin Bombardment, Impact Tremors, Mirari's Wake, Parallel Lives, Privileged Position, and finally Perforos because tokens. What do you guys see here that jumps out to you?
Nothing that really shocks me. I think this is kind of what I would expect to see. There's no surprises here. You have a few things like Burgeoning Exploration that let you get extra lands down for Hazezon. There's Mirari's Wake that lets you, double up on your lands to have a big powerhouse turn, and it buffs your tokens. That's great. There's the token doublers like Parallel Lives, Crow's Position, Anointed Procession. Divine Visitation, actually, number one, I like it a lot just because it, basically gives your tokens +3/+3 in flying. But in this deck especially, it makes them no longer sand and or warriors, so it gets around the trigger from Hazezon leaving the field. So even if it didn't do that, it would be a great inclusion, but I wanted to make sure I pointed that out because that makes it even better. It's already a really solid card in its deck, and I wanted to mention that because it's even better here. So he has the 2 haste enablers here as well, which makes sense because it lets him attack a turn sooner with the tokens of Hazezon. Man, I just don't have a whole lot that I would change under enchantments. What do you guys think?
I don't like Burgeoning and or Exploration in this deck. I get you want to get all your lands out, but that also means you're dumping your hand fast, and he already says he has a problem refueling.
Yeah.
So in my opinion, if you're going to run one of the two, run Exploration because you get to play the lands on your turn versus having that like antsiness to, my opponent played a land, I get to play a land. The next opponent played a land, I'm going to play another land, and you find out on turn 2 you have 4 cards in hand and you still can't cast any of them.
And you've painted a huge bullseye in your back.
Yes.
See, I actually like Burgeoning over Exploration. I think just the upside is so much higher, and the fact that if any of the draw spells in the deck do fire off and do well, I mean, you're going to get 3 lands into play that next turn. It's better over the course of the game. In my experiences, I don't play a whole lot of Exploration, but every time I have seen it, I've never been blown away like I have been with Burgeoning. So I would actually say I'd keep Burgeoning and cut the Exploration maybe for something else that's just going to actively get lands into play, like a ramp spell.
Well, I will disagree with both of you, and I will say he needs to do one of two things: either pull both Burgeoning and Exploration as things stand right now, because I don't think there's enough draw to support them, or leave them both in and make sure the deck draws enough cards to rationalize having them there, so you are always using their abilities to play those lands. I think you want to do one or the other. I think you want to either have the ability to utilize them almost every time they're down because you have cards in your hand, or you want to just acknowledge that I'm just not going to be able to use those triggers to their full effect, so I'm just going to replace them with one more land ramp spell like a Search for Tomorrow or something.
And see, that's kind of a theme, I think, with the deck overall right now.
Yeah.
It's kind of torn between two things. Hazezon cares a lot about having a lot of lands in play, but the rest of the deck is kind of a typical land or just a typical tokens deck. So it's kind of trying to do a little bit of two things, and I'm not sure how dependent on Hazezon you want to be, but you could totally be doing that, flicker effects, get a lot of lands into play with those token support cards, or you can be doing kind of what it typically is doing. So it's already a little bit split. And I think some of the draw spells that are in the deck could be improved to kind of get along with the lines of what you're saying, Dana. You play something more consistent so you're better able to take advantage of Burgeoning, of Exploration, and those types of cards.
All right, let's since we're talking ramp, let's go over to where most of the ramp is, and that's under the sorceries. And Max, you wanna pop us through those?
Ooh, yeah, there's 22 sorceries in this deck. So we have Austere Command, Blasphemous Act, Camaraderie, Collective Unconscious, Cultivate, Dragon Fodder, Dusk, and Dawn. Escape to the Wilds, Farseek, Finale of Glory, Goblin War Party, Harvest Season, Hour of Reckoning, Kadama's Reach, Krenko's Command, Mog Infestation, Nature's Lore, Rampant Growth, Shamanic Rev, Skyshroud Claim, Sylvan Offering, and Tempt with Vengeance. Hoofda.
That's 22 sorceries, indeed. First of all, are there any of these that you guys really like a lot of this deck?
I really like Tempt with Vengeance.
Yes.
I actually think that's the sorcery I like the least. That was on a list of cards that I would cut, because you're counting on other people taking the Tempt, and you never take the Tempt. And the times that you're going to want Tempt with Vengeance the most, if you have an Impact Tremors in play or anything like that, people are actively choosing to lose the game if they're taking the Tempt. So I think the times that you're going to want it, you're not going to get enough out of it. I'm not a big fan of Tempt with Vengeance.
Now, see, I like it. I think it's one of the spells that you don't care if anyone takes it. It's still really, really valuable, particularly because they come into play with haste. And although your opponents get haste in their tokens as well, it is useless because it's not on their turn. So not only are you getting more tokens than them if they take it, your tokens are conceivably better because you can use them immediately. And you also are running, Anointed Procession and Divine Visitation and a bunch of things that double up your tokens, Parallel Lives. You have the, Perforos and the Impact Tremors to make those tokens do damage. I think there's a lot of really good synergy with Tempt with Vengeance in this deck, and I think that it's a really good card if nobody takes it, and if they take it, well, then it's just disgusting. So I actually do like it here. What I don't like is Escape to the Wilds. And I was going to mention this before when we were talking about draw, so I'll mention it now because this is a good time to segue into it. Most of Red's draw is what's called impulse draw, where like until the end of your turn, you may play this card. That's really, really useful, and I'm a fan of impulse draw. However, this is a deck with a ton of like 4 drops and 5 drops and 6 and 7 and 8 drops. And man, I feel like if you're spending 5 mana to cast Escape to the Wilds, yes, you can impulse until the end of your next turn, so it's buying you some time, but I just feel like you're going to get burned way more often than you would in some green-red decks with this card by virtue of so many of your spells costing so much mana. Do you guys have any thoughts on that here?
No, I typically agree with you on Escape to the Wilds. I think Outpost Siege is just a more consistent type of that effect. I think even over Escape to the Wilds, something like Commune with Lava, where you can just exile the top X cards and then you have until the next turn, that's a little more flexible too, so you don't have to sink 5 mana into it. And it's instant speed too, so you can kind of leave mana open. If you need to cast something else instead, you can. It's kind of like the counter spells where, you have it if you need it, and if you don't need it, that's great, because then you can just use it later. I agree that Escape to the Wilds is kind of loosey-goosey. I know it's a new card. It's kind of fun to play around with.
Yeah.
I'm not sold that it's the type of draw spell that you want, especially at 5 mana.
Yeah.
You already have, most of the draw spells in here are 5+ mana that are board dependent, so you're going to need to lower that a little bit. Even if you just play something like Magmatic Insight or Faithless Looting, some of those cheap card filtering spells that Red offers. You don't need the sheer card advantage, the card draw, but sometimes you just need some card quality, some velocity through the deck to find what you need. And so just a simple Faithless Looting is going to be able to do that for you.
Yeah, I think if you're playing a red-green, elf deck of some sort, I don't know who that commander would be, or red-green goblins or something, where you've got a bunch of spells in your deck that cost, 2 or 3 mana or something, then Escape makes sense because you can cast it and probably really, really often get your land drops and cast all 3 of those spells. I would worry in this deck you're going to really frequently strand cards that you can't cast. Max, what do you think of it?
I never seen it played, but I definitely agree with both of you. It seems non-consistent to where I would want something like a Faithless Looting or a Cathartic Reunion or even like a Tormenting Voice just to continually get cards into my hand versus maybe even whiffing on the top 5 cards.
Okay, so there's 3 board wipes in here. There's Austere Command, Blasphemous Act, and Hour of Reckoning. What do you guys think of those 3? Is that what you would run here, or is there something you would change about that?
I think those are fine. Hour of Reckoning is a fantastic board wipe if you're in a token deck, so that makes a lot of sense. Dusks to Dawn, I love. I've played that card many times.
Oh, and Blasphemous Act, I missed that one, yeah.
Yeah, and Blasphemous Act is kind of like the go-to red sweeper, so yeah, I have no problems. It's a good number that you want to be running. Even if you're a creature-dependent deck, you always want to be running some amount of board wipes because there's times where things aren't going right for you and somebody else is, so you just need to address the board. So having a few board wipes, especially ones that can benefit you, like Hour of Reckoning, I'm on board with those.
So there's a few draw spells in here, Collective Unconsciousness and, what's the other one? Shamanic Revelation, that draw cards based on the number of creatures you control. Those
Camaraderie as well.
Camaraderie does as well, yeah. So those make sense. You're going to get burned on occasion by having 2 of them in hand after someone else board wipes, but there's enough of an upside that I get it, particularly if you pepper in a few things like the Harmonize we mentioned before, or Matt mentioned Outpost Siege, Light Up the Stage, whatever. I think that diversifies your draw base enough that it makes worthwhile. So how about the ramp package that's in here? Since you need lands with Hazezon, we're looking at, we've got Cultivate, we have Farseek, Kadama's Reach, Nature's Lore, Rampant Growth, Sky Shroud Claim, and that looks to be it here.
And Harvest Season.
Harvest Season, I guess, yeah. What do you guys think of that?
It's fine. I don't know what I would change. Harvest Season is probably the most magical Christmas land.
Sure.
Mainly because he's probably going to be ripping the shocks out of his deck with the fetches and whatnot prior to this. But only running 11 basics seems rough, maybe.
Yeah, I'm torn on Harvest Season as well. It doesn't do you much good if Hazezon and the Sand Warriors aren't in play. So I don't know if it's a win more. It's maybe sets you up for a later turn, but it's not really ramp. Like ramp is what you're trying to do to get other things out sooner. And I don't know if it helps you get things out sooner so much as it lets you be strong late game and go from like being strong to being stronger, maybe. I don't know if
it's definitely a card that pushes you over the top, because not only do you have to have those creatures, but they have to be tapped. So they have to, in this deck, they have to survive combat, which with a bunch of 1/1s, that's not always a guarantee. So it is a little Christmas land. I really like it. I think it's a really fun inclusion. It's probably the most fun card other than Mog Infestation, because Mog Infestation, you can blow up somebody else's board, or if you have a Purphoros in play, blow up your own board, replace it with goblins, and just dome everybody for lethal. But I do like Harvest Season. This is the package that I think kind of ties into how dependent do you want to be on Hazezon. If you want to have more Sand Warriors go into play, then you probably want to play a few more ramp spells. And so it's fine for what the deck's doing right now, but it's whatever direction you want to lean. I would suggest adding a few more, depending on how important you want to make your commander.
Yeah, I don't know what you would really change here either. I'm kind of with you guys as well. I think I want maybe one more ramp spell. I don't know if Goblin War Party is okay. I think Sylvan Offering is the one I'm not sure about. Yeah, I don't know what I would pull here. But I do feel like maybe one more ramp might be useful, whether it's Search for Tomorrow or, I don't know, Nissa's Pilgrimage or something. I feel like one more of those that you can get in underneath your commander to get a land out might be nice. This feels just a little bit light, but I don't think there's any real obvious removals. Krenko's Command I don't think probably does enough.
No, it's kind of dependent on having Purphoros. I think the only ramp spell, because the mana base is like we said, it's kind of ideal. The only ramp spell that I would really consider that I think would actually be really impactful is Splendid Reclamation. You get all those fetch lands out of the graveyard onto the battlefield. If you're running a full fetch package like you are here, it can make a massive impact. So yeah, I like it. Puts a lot of lands in play. It is kind of dependent on how many lands you've been kind of working with already. So it might be a little more in the harvest season than you would like to be, but it's still, you pay 4 mana. Even if you get 4 lands back, you get your Canopy Vista, or Horizon Canopy, Horizon Canopy and your other Horizon land. That's pretty good right there too. So I think Splendid Reclamation is maybe the one sorcery I would add, depending on how many lands you want to be fetching out.
I've got one that I'm going to suggest as maybe an ad, and it's kind of along the same lines as Mog Infestation. And I guess we didn't mention one of the things nice about Mog Infestation here is it's destroying each creature you control and replacing them with more goblins. So, particularly if you have something like a token doubler in play, well, you're getting 4 tokens for every creature that comes in that you make with Mog Infestation. So it's amazing. But the other thing that's amazing about it, like we mentioned with Divine Visitation, they're then no longer Sand Warriors. So you're now going to get around Hazezon's leave the battlefield trigger that's going to kill your Sand Warriors. That's really, really nice. By the same token, there's a card from back in Khan's block, Descent of Dragons. It's 4 red for a sorcery. Same thing, destroy any number of target creatures, and for each creature destroyed this way, its controller puts a 4/4 red dragon token onto the battlefield. So worst case scenario, you're upgrading your 1/1 Sand Warriors into 4/4 evasive dragons, and that's not nothing. Being able to give them flying is a big deal. That's one of the things about Divine Visitation that's so strong as well, is it's getting them up and off the ground and makes it much easier to swing through for damage. But same as with Visitation and same as with the Goblin spell, they're also now no longer Sand or Warriors. So when Hazezon leaves, you're not losing those tokens. I think it does double duty, both as a kind of a kill condition by making those creatures into big, huge evasive beaters in a deck that has a ton of things that give things haste. So that's also the other problem with Descent of the Dragons. Yes, you're upgrading your creatures, but they can't attack. You can only cast on your turn. They're stuck waiting until next turn. Well, in this deck, pretty frequently, they're going to be able to swing that turn. So you're just going to surprise somebody by going from having a bunch of creatures on the ground that are 1/1s to having a bunch of 4/4s in the air, and they can still swing. So I think that card is worthy of an include in this deck.
Yeah, I like it. I think Descent of the Dragons it's a very over the top, just push through and just off somebody type of card. And a little Christmas landy, a little board dependent,
sure,
but that's kind of the theme of the deck at this point. But yeah, so I do like it. It is a very Mog Infestation type of card. It's flexible, gets everything off the board. It's pretty good. Yeah, I can get behind that.
So let's jump over and look at the few instants that are in this deck. There's 9 of them. There's Arachnogenesis, which is the fog that makes you spiders, which is a great fit here in a deck with mana doublers, with creature doublers, and that cares about tokens. Artifact Mutation destroys an artifact and makes you tokens. That's a really solid spell. Aura Mutation is the aura version of that. Beast Within, always good removal. Boros Charm has some utility, but I'm betting in this deck it's just a way to save your board state and keep your creatures around when someone else wraths. Heroic Intervention, same thing. Teferi's Protection, same thing. So 3 ways to save your stuff, and I think that I would have all 3 of them, so I completely agree with that. Secure the Wastes, token maker that's really efficient at instant speed, and March of the Multitude, same thing. So we have 9 spells that for the most part either are removal, protection, or token makers. What do you guys think of this collection?
I like the protection suite. I think that's pretty important, especially when the biggest weakness has already been defined as it's board dependent. So being able to protect said board is pretty vital. So I do like the Boros Charm, Heroic Intervention, Teferi's Protection, all good additions. Secure the Wastes. I've played it in token decks myself. Sometimes it's a little iffy. The X spells, they're just they're never what they seem to be. We already talked about the curve being over 3, and Secure the Waste brings that down, but really you're never casting Secure the Waste for a few. March of the Multitudes you can get away with a little bit easier because it has Convoke, but Secure the Waste I'm not keen on. The thing that is missing to me is you're playing white and you're not playing path or plow. And I think those two just, you need to answer the board more often than not. And so I'd find a way to fit those in. But other than that, I mean, they're fine. It's nothing that you would, be surprised to see in any given deck.
How about you, Max? What do you think here?
Yeah, I totally agree with Matt on those removals, adding Path and Swords, and even going one further, maybe even like Generous Gift, since Beast Within is already in here.
Yeah, because I mean that it's obviously not as efficient to cast Generous Gift compared to like Swords or Path, but it does give you the versatility of being able to hit any target.
Right, and it can also trigger Perforos by killing something of yours and giving yourself the elephant.
And if if you happen to have Doubling Season out and one of your other doublers, I mean, it's a little Magical Christmas Land, but like I've seen plenty of token decks that had multiple token doublers out, and if you have Impact Tremors or Perforos, that could be a legit play. Like I would. It sounds like the kind of thing that's only in a perfect world, but like I would bet this deck more often than you would think has two of the doublers out and Impact Tremors or Perforos, and you top deck one of those creature makers, like, I can just clock everyone right now for like 8 or 10 damage or something if I Beast Within my own, token. So yeah, no, that's absolutely a thing.
My final suggestion would be, since maybe a backup plan is Perforos or Impact Tremors, or even just to go get like Divine Visitation, an Enlightened Tutor would be really good in this deck, just to be able to set up that next turn, maybe even set up your win with maybe something in your hand. It just means you can get to your win con just a little faster, and there aren't any really other tutors in this deck, so it doesn't make it super overpowered.
Yeah, there are 13 enchantments in this deck, and 10 of them are game-changing. I mean, really, like they are. Like if you drop one of those doublers, that radically changes the face of the game. If you drop Divine Visitation before your tokens come in, that radically changes things. A haste enabler, and there's multiple ones in your enchantments, that screws up everybody's math. Impact Tremors or Perforos screws up everyone's ability to not get domed by all your tokens. Privileged Position keeps them from interacting with your stuff. Mari's Wake buffs your creatures and doubles your mana. Almost every one of those enchantments is something that absolutely alters what's on the battlefield and what's happening. And for 1 mana for an Enlightened Tutor, yeah, that makes sense. How about you, Matt? What do you think?
I do like the suggestion. The nice thing about all these artifacts and enchantments in the deck is there's something at any given point in time where it's going to be great. Say, you top deck an Enlightened Tutor. Well, you can just go get a Skull Clamp, and then you really get the ball rolling too. So it's nice that there's some versatility behind Enlightened Tutor. It would be a good addition. Yeah, I think that's one of those types of tutors where it's narrow enough that it's never going to like get some eye rolls like just tutoring at will with Demonic Tutor. But it's good enough that you can play around with it, get something that's going to be relevant at any given point in the game. So yeah, I think that's a great inclusion.
All right. Well, shall we jump over to the last column left on our list here, creatures?
Let's do it.
All right. Matt, what do we have here for creatures?
Well, we only got 13 creatures, so let's do this. Avenger of Zendikar leads the pack, followed by Craterhoof Behemoth, Deep Forest Hermit, Dragon Broodmother, Elish Norn Grand Cenobite, Goblin Bushwhacker, Nissa Vastwood Seer, Ogre Battle Driver, Reese the Redeemed, Sakura Tribe-Elder, Samut, Voice of Dissent, Tendershoot Dryad, and finally Tilinali's Summoner. What stands out to you guys? What do you think is good? What's not good? Let's hear it.
Deep Forest Hermit is a super cool card. It was in Modern Horizons. It's 5 mana. It's a 1/1, and when it enters the battlefield, you create 4 green squirrel creature tokens, and squirrels get +1/+1. But it has vanishing, so it goes away after a few turns. I mean, it's fine. It's cool. Making squirrels is cool. Everyone likes squirrel tokens. I just don't think it's maybe good enough for the deck. I think it's a bit of a gimmick, and it's kind of like a meme card more than anything. And if you want to run it for a meme card, absolutely do that. But if you're running it because it's good, I don't think it's good enough.
I think it's fine. It's 5 bodies for 5 mana. I mean, if you have a Perforos, that's a lot of damage coming through on Perforos. I mean, but that also, you could apply that to a lot of cards in the deck.
Yeah.
So I do get where you're coming from too, Dana, but I don't hate it. Vanishing is fine. Say, the last counter is going to come off. Just make it a chump blocker and it's fine. The creature suite, I think, is fine overall. The biggest one that I don't like is Goblin Bushwhacker. It's just a one-time shot to give everything haste for one turn. Sure, it's a little pump, but this is the card I think you should be cutting for Hammer of Purphoros. It's a haste enabler. You can make tokens. The +1/+0 off of Bushwhackers, it's neat, but I don't think that it's necessarily something that's going to be good all the time. It's very low impact, and it's a terrible late game draw, whereas Hammer is not.
Okay. How about you, Max? What do you think here?
Yeah, I kind of agree with what both of you said. I'm not a huge fan of the Nissa Vastwood Seer. I understand it gets a land, but the Planeswalker side I don't think is going to do much for this deck at all. I would rather see something like Champion of Lambholt in that spot, since you're going to be pumping out so many tokens. You make Champion bigger.
Yeah.
And it's just another way it's another mini Craterhoof. It's another Pathbreaker Ibex, which also isn't in this deck. And I know that's one of Matt's favorite cards.
You said my card. You got me all excited.
Yay. But yeah, that would be my suggestion, would be cut the Nissa for something that's either going to buff your tokens or make tokens or benefit from you making tokens.
If I'm going to play something that costs me 2 colorless and a green and then goes and gets the land, it would be something like Wood Elves that just put the land into play versus into my hand. Like, I would rather just get the land as a ramp thing off the creature than have it be into my hand and then have it, maybe flip at some point in the game. I like Nissa, and I run her in, I think, 2 different decks. But I don't know if I'd run her in this deck. I just don't know if she does what this deck wants to be doing entirely. Dragon Broodmother, I think, is a cool card, but I think you've got a bunch of big, 6 and 7 mana haymakers, and you could absolutely use to pull one of them out for something more efficient and streamlined. And if I was going to pull a haymaker for something smaller to lower the curve a little bit, it would be Dragon Broodmother.
I think that's a good call. I think a lot of these high CMC cards can get subbed with a lot of the suggestions that we're making. We talked about that with Camaraderie and Collective Unconscious. Your draw spells can get lowered a little bit. Dragon Broodmother is along those same lines. It's expensive. You need to be lowering the curve a little bit. Yeah. I think if you were forced to pick between Dragon Broodmother and Elish Norn, I think Elish Norn every day.
I totally agree with that.
And triple red in this deck probably isn't going to be the easiest thing to pull off with Broodmother, so that is a good card to throw on the chopping block.
How about you, Max? What do you think?
Yeah, I think Broodmother, again, like you guys both said, it has a lot of mana pips. The triple red isn't fun. It kind of seems a little win more to me.
Sure. Okay, I think that's what I have. Is there any other final thoughts from you guys?
I just think overall the deck, you could lean one way or another. There's some really cool cards you could lean into if you did kind of a Flicker type of theme. So Flicker your Avenger of Zendikar, your Hazezon, Deep Forest Hermit, some of those types of cards where you can kind of reset them. That actually seems like a really fun kind of deck, and it's something unique that you can be doing as opposed to, well, here's just generic Naya tokens. Gives the deck just a little more personality. Or you could lean away from the lands matter, take away from the commander, and do a few different things too, and just kind of lower the curve and make it more efficient and kind of keep with what the deck's already doing. So there's a couple ways you can do it. I think there's a few cards that are kind of easy cuts, and we all kind of pointed them out. There's a few cards on the maybe board that I think fill some holes too that accomplish things. I don't think that there's a way to really make all of these tokens super relevant besides 1/1s. In the maybe board, there's a Beastmaster Ascension, which is fantastic because if things are going how you plan on it, you play Beastmaster Ascension and you attack and it's already activated. It's already giving everything +5/+5. So it's basically a 3-mana win condition in this type of deck. I really like that. That'd be one card that I'd move from the maybe board over. Pier's Whim is never a bad card. I think you could take out either your aura or your artifact mutation and put in Piers Whim instead, because you're going to be doing the same type of thing, but it scales so much better to multiplayer. It's something super nice. And then in token decks, one card that I absolutely love is Shivan Harvest, because you have so many bodies to sacrifice. And I'm going to read this card because not many people know what it does. So Shivan Harvest, it's 1 and a red, and all it says is pay 1 and a red and sacrifice a creature, destroy target non-basic land. We already mentioned you have Strip Mine in there to kind of get rid of some pesky lands, say if there's a Maze of Ith or whatever else is going on. So it's just a way to kind of keep those problem lands in check. You have a lot of bodies that are going to be, you're going to attack with them. You're going to have some extras. So put those to use. It's a good mana sink late game too. I like Tilling Ollie's Summoner as kind of a mana sink as well. So having some of those cards that just, if you flood out, Shivan Harvest is a good way to kind of pick off some things that people are kind of getting away with. Say there's a Cabal Coffers you don't want sticking around. Shivan Harvest gets that off the board. So it's just a nice utility card. It gives you something a little bit extra to do with extra mana and helps out just keeping everybody else in check.
How about you, Max? Any final thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, I love this deck. I've always tried to do Naya tokens. I've tried to do it a few times. Matt covered a lot of the cards in the maybe board that probably could deserve a spot in this deck, and a few extras none of us really talked about were some of the Ixalan flip enchantments, like Growing Rights or even Legion's Landing. Those would be powerhouses in this deck. But again, finding room for those can be challenging.
Yeah, I mean, that's always the problem with a lot of decks, really, but like this kind of deck, okay, it's a Hazezon token deck, so it's making tokens, but I need to have X amount of ramp spells to get Hazezon out, and I wanted them to be lands because he scales with the amount of lands in play. So you need, just there, like just starting out, you need to have X amount of ramp in the deck, and then X amount of things that interact with your tokens. That's already using up a ton of slots. And then if you want to look at, like you said, you want to look at doing some kind of blink shenanigans, well, then you need the blink shenanigans. And if you want to run, there's just a lot of asks with a finite amount of slots here. Some decks are just like that. Like they just want to do a lot of different things, and it gets really tricky finding that balance. So I hopefully some of the suggestions we had help him find that a little bit, even more so than it already is. But, I mean, if you are fortunate enough to have gotten a hold of Hazezon Tamar as a commander, you're already kind of winning. It's an old, obscure, expensive card. And, I mean, if I had to play Naya tokens, that's who I would play.
But you just don't want to spend $100 for it.
I don't want to spend $100 on it, yeah. But I'm a big fan of this card. It's one of the few commanders from the early days of Magic that's a legit playable, effective commander, and so I'm glad he shared this deck with us. We do appreciate it. Thank you very much for supporting us on the show here, Stephen. We do appreciate it. It does mean a lot. Not only does it mean a lot for like us keeping the lights on and keeping the show going, but it's just a ridiculously profound compliment to have people support the show on Patreon, that you're willing to, give a few dollars of your hard-earned money over to us to talk about Magic. That's fantastic, and I can't express how much that means to us that you're willing to tell us that our content means enough for you to hand over a few of your dollars in thanks. So thank you very much from us. We do appreciate it. And Matt Morgan, thank you very much for helping us out, subbing for Chris the last couple shows.
Well, thank you for having me on again. It's been good getting to catch up. Max, I know I don't get to talk on podcast forums too often, so it's nice getting to catch up with you again. Yeah, it's been a really good time. Hopefully it doesn't take Chris breaking his foot for me to get to come back again.
We will for sure have you back.
You definitely passed. I'll let you back.
Yes.
Excellent.
And
all right.
As per tradition, we'll continue said custody battle over Dana, who gets to be having him for Christmas and who has other Christmas.
I like it.
That's a little too real right there.
I got 2 Christmases as a kid, so it's only nice that I can let somebody else have 2 Christmases too.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. All right. Our podcast theme is Retro Future Dirty by Kevin MacLeod, licensed through Creative Commons. Our show is edited by Ken Peddle. You can find him online at LOAD3R on the Twitter birds. You can find me at Dana Roach. You can find Max at CMDRCentral_Max. And you can find Chris at WiseSquishy1. Matt, where can we find you?
You can find me on the Twitters as well, at Mathimus55, MATHIMUS55.
All right. We will be back next week with a brand new show on Monday. Until then, I am Dana.
I'm Max.
And I helped.